Hello everybody, welcome back to Steven's Fight Show. And in this video we're going to be talking about Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Now Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, I had a completely different video scheduled for this fight. And if you're wondering what kind of video I had for this fight, it was going to be a prediction video on who I thought was going to win the fight. I literally had a whole official prediction video lined up for this fight. I was going to break down the press conference, the build up for this fight, the matchups, and what this fight means for both fighters. But nope, last minute I have to scratch that idea and instead I'm making this video. And first things first, I want to apologize in advance if this video is a short video. This video might be around 5 to 7 minutes long. And usually whenever I make a video about any fight, I usually make a video about my prediction, or a video about me breaking down a fight, or a video about me reviewing a fight. And that usually takes around 10 to 12 minutes long. But specifically for this video is going to be a short video because Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn is officially off because Conor Benn tested positive for a banned substance. And literally I cannot believe it. I was literally looking forward to this fight for so long. When this fight was first scheduled, I was so excited to see this fight. I haven't been excited for a fight like this in a very long time, strictly because it's something that we don't really get to see too often. I mean, when can we really say that we see two boxing stars in the game today who are sons of previous boxers who have boxed against each other before, and those sons are going to box in the modern day today? You don't see stuff like this happen too often. And I was following the face-to-face, the press conference, the countdowns, the documentaries, etc. Like, I was actually invested in this fight. And for this video, I'm going to specifically talk about my thoughts and my reaction to Conor Benn testing positive for a banned substance in his VADA testing. So like I said again, Conor Benn tested positive for a banned substance in his drug test for the VADA testing. And I'm not too sure on what the substance is itself, but from what I'm hearing, it's a substance that makes women pregnant. And from what I read, for men, if they take this drug, it makes their testicles reactivate because it relates to a testosterone problem. And straight up, I'm going to say this is a bad look for Conor Benn because this fight was considered the biggest fight of his career. If he had won this fight, his career would have taken a big turn and he would have been one step closer to that stardom level. Conor Benn would not only be one step closer to potentially getting a world title shot if he goes back to welterweight, but he can increase his popularity and his value in the boxing world if he did win this fight. And don't get me wrong, if he would have lost, it would have been tough for him to resume his career at welterweight, but it would certainly be easier for him to do that than Chris Eubank returning back to middleweight. Because on paper, Chris Eubank should win this fight. He has all of the advantages, he has more experience, and everything that he's done in his career speaks for itself. And Conor Benn, I'm a fan of him for multiple reasons. One of them being is his attitude. He behaves and he acts like a champion. In most interviews I've seen of Conor Benn, he usually always acts class. I don't really sense cockiness whenever I see him talk. There's always a lot of fighters that are always over their head or they get too overconfident. But with Conor Benn, in my opinion, usually he's level-headed. And the second reason being that he is one of the few fighters in boxing where his style can create amazing fights. Conor Benn, he's a pressure fighter. He's a fighter that always comes forward. He's a fighter that brings it every single time. His style of coming forward and throwing shots with mean intentions and breaking his opponents down, going to the body, throwing combinations, being explosive, moving side to side, staying low, etc. It makes people want to watch him fight. He essentially has a style that is called a swarmer in boxing. And the thing is, with other great fighters in the world, whenever people who don't watch boxing, whenever they watch boxing for the first time, if they watch a fighter where they know that that fighter could be good, but their style is not entertaining, then that person won't care to watch that fighter again. Whereas there's some fighters where they might not be as good, but their style attracts other people to be invested in what they're doing. Conor Benn is one of the few fighters in the world where people would walk away and say, hey, I want to watch him again regardless if he's good or not. Because people feel like they're getting their money's worth. So now to see him be considered a cheater in this sport, it's just disappointing because he has a pretty good look towards the future of his career. If you look at his past performances against different opponents, which has now become controversial because he's tested positive, you can see that the dude has plenty of potential. And like I've said previously, cheating in this sport is absolutely not tolerated. It's not the same when you cheat in other sports like football or basketball. This is a sport where your life is on the line for other people's entertainment, and it's unfair aware that the other guy is making sacrifices and training clean while the other guy is cheating. Imagine yourself being in that position where you're following the rules. You're training and eating clean, you're waking up early, you're doing your runs, you're putting in rounds on rounds of pad work, sparring, and the other guy, he's juicing to give himself a bigger advantage to beat you in your fight. And this is where I feel bad for Chris Eubank Jr. because he was contractually required to make 157 pounds with a rehydration clause. And he also trained hard for this fight even though he claims to only be at 60%. And although Chris Eubank Jr. he was playing a lot of mind games in the lead up to this fight, in my opinion he handled this situation very well. He kept his composure throughout fight week and he did what he was supposed to do. He didn't let his emotions get the best of him. And even though Chris Eubank Jr. is the one who has all the right to say I don't want to do this fight, he is still advocating for this fight to continue. Chris Eubank Jr. showed up with everything in check, but Conor Benn didn't, and it's a shame because Conor Benn, he describes himself as a young lion who wanted this fight all along. Conor Benn, who was the one who was very eager to call this fight from the very beginning. And for Chris Eubank, a fight like this for him, he wasn't really eager to go through with it. And a fight like this for him, it doesn't matter more to him than Conor Benn, especially with the way that he was acting during the lead up to this fight. You would probably think that he wasn't even taking the fight seriously at all. And if you had to take a guess before all of this happened, if you had to put a bet on whose fault it was if this fight was to fall through, most people would probably say Chris Eubank, but in the end, it was Conor Benn who tested positive for a banned substance. Both Conor Benn and Chris Eubank were trying to push for the fight to happen anyways, even though I don't think it should. And I understand that there's a lot of money to be made from this fight if it was to continue, but it still shouldn't happen for many reasons. The first one being is that it's not a fair advantage to Chris Eubank, even though he claims to not take Conor Benn seriously in multiple interviews and press conferences. Chris Eubank is already at a lose-lose position by taking this fight, and if he beats Conor Benn, his win will have less value than it already did. Remember, Chris Eubank is the favorite for this fight. A lot of boxing fans agree on the fact that Chris Eubank should wipe the floor against Conor Benn. So if the fight continues, I don't think it would benefit Chris Eubank in any other way. The second reason is that we should not reward bad behavior in this sport. If you make a mistake, you shouldn't receive any type of reward at all. As a kid, if you were in trouble for doing something wrong, if you weren't punished for it, then at most you don't get anything at all. You don't just start earning rewards for your mistake because it provokes you to continue to do it. Psychologically, in your mind, if you continue to do it, then there's no consequences. And the crazy part is, Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn knew about this for 2 weeks now. If none of this was announced, then the whole world could have been fooled. This is such a disappointing outcome because this is not what the fans wanted at all. In fact, fans were probably praying that something like this wouldn't happen. This fight was for history, and the build-up for this fight, again, was actually entertaining. Both guys were throwing jabs at each other on social media. Chris Eubank was talking about he's only going to be 60% for this fight, and that's all he needed to beat Conor Benn. And if he was at 100%, it would have been public execution. He also said that it would take a miracle for Conor Benn to win. And he also said that he was going to abstain sex for only 2 weeks to fight Conor Benn. And Conor, on the other hand, was claiming that he will be the first man to stop Chris Eubank. A lot of fighting words that would have been nice if all of it was backed up in the ring. And now that all of this is unfolding, Chris Eubank said that his dad advised him to not take this fight. And it makes you wonder, did he know that something like this was going to happen? Did he know that Conor Benn was going to cheat right before their fight started? It's definitely something to consider because Chris Eubank Sr. didn't want to be involved in this fight at all. So in the end, all of this is just a terrible move for Conor because all of his previous achievements are now in jeopardy. I mean, at this point, his former opponent, Chris Van Heerden, is now skeptical about whether or not he was clean for their fight. He stated that he's never been dropped by a punch ever. He's fought people like Jaron Ennis and Errol Spence Jr., and both of them were not able to drop him by a single punch. And Conor Benn did it multiple times. And the thing is, Chris Van Heerden has all the right to question whether or not Conor Benn was clean during their fight. Even guys like Chris Algieri has a right to even question whether or not Conor Benn was clean for any of their fights. And lastly, the last thing I want to talk about in this video, which kind of correlates to this topic, but how do pro boxers and boxing experts say that YouTube boxing is ruining the sport when we have things like this going on in pro boxing? We have pro boxers that are cheating in this sport. We have top pro boxers boxers avoiding other top pro boxers. We have promoters hiding the fact that boxers are failing drug tests. We have so much going on in pro boxing that it's just a mess. And yet YouTube boxing is the one that is supposedly ruining the sport. Like literally last year we had Oscar Valdez test positive for a PED and somehow the fight still went on. I'm sorry, but if you test positive for a PED, that means you are caught cheating. So if you cheat, the fight shouldn't go on at all. And on top of that, last year we had Evander Holyfield somehow come back to boxing. We had Evander Holyfield, who was 60 something years old, go up against Vitor Belfort, and it was just so sad to watch. How did a boxing commission allow this to happen? They allowed a 60-year-old man who has not competed in 30 years to step back into a boxing ring. We have big fights falling out like AJ versus Fury, and somehow YouTube boxing is ruining the sport. At least in YouTube boxing, we get fights that we want to see. We have YouTube boxers that are putting in the work and training like boxers. Say what you want about them skill-wise, but I don't understand how they're making a mockery of the sport if they're putting in the work. And another thing to remember is that they don't have to do this. If they were to stop boxing today, they can assure themselves that they can feed their family for the rest of their life. Whereas other pro boxers today, they can't assure that. So I don't understand this narrative that YouTube boxing is ruining pro boxing when they're two completely different things. And pro boxing has issues that are bigger than YouTube boxing. But anyways guys, thank you guys for listening to what I have to say. And let me know, if this fight was to happen again in the future, who do you have? Chris Eubank Jr. or Conor Benn? Drop a comment and let me know in the comment section down below. Now if you guys enjoy content that is related to combat sports, please drop a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be greatly appreciated. And other than that, it's been Steven signing out. Peace.